Well, I think the first thing I recognized in this new role is nobody's coming to save you, and you are the they that you're waiting on as a vice president. You're the they. You are the doer.
Hello, Loren.
Hi, Kelsey Finn. How are you?
I am well. Are you ready for another episode of Campus Confidential?
I am ready. It's a good day. It's a sunny day. We have great guests. I'm really excited to have this episode air.
Yeah. And this episode is a little different than what we've normally done. You want to tell the audience what we did?
Yeah, we had a great time at the NASPA conference, the Student Affairs Conference in Boston. We recorded with an audience, two really, really outstanding guests, and Dr. Jim Hoppy and Bernard Little. So it'll be a lot of fun for folks to hear this today, I think.
I agree. I think we had some laughs and we had some great insights from both of them. And I think when I think about conferences in general, they've been very important to my career, my network, and my learning along the way as a professional. Where did you start your conference going experience, and what has that been like for you over the years?
Yeah, well, I was pretty lucky. I went to my first professional conference as a graduate student, and I was lucky to have people that took me, people who had been networked into the profession and took me and introduced me to other people. And I've thought a lot about that over the years as I've taken early career staff, young staff, graduate students as well. What about you? What was your early experience like?
I started at the state level. When I was in Illinois, there was an Illinois State Association for Student Affairs people. Can't remember the name. That's terrible. But
maybe it was called that.
Maybe. To your point, it was in grad school started the experience. And then really ACUI was the first professional association that I spent my time, started volunteering. And then, of course, NACS, long history.
Yeah, then you were
NACS.
responsible for the professional development that we all benefited from.
Yeah, that was one of the best honors of my career was the 6 years I spent as the CEO at NACS, really behind the scenes and what it takes in thinking about bringing to life the professional development experience for the people doing the work.
When you were responsible for the conference, NACS, where did you go to get what you needed when you were a professional in the field?
Well, I feel like any good association has an association for the association. So there's a thing called CHIMA, which is the Council of Higher Ed Association Management Groups. So every higher ed association executive, we would meet twice a year. And we would talk about kind of where the industry is going, the offerings we have, how we could work together. So that was one. The Association for Association Executives also had learning. And then I would attend other higher ed association conferences, leadership events. I really think to just stay abreast of what was happening in higher ed.
Mm-hmm. You know, when you mentioned Association for Associations, I was laughing to myself because I once worked at a university that had a committee on committees. And and their job was to basically approve more committees. You know, that was the role. So redundant, I
think
guess.
Those are more common. NACS has a committee on committees.
Oh, okay. Maybe it's more common than I thought.
It's a great one. So what do you think is one nugget from today's conversation you're excited for people to hear?
Well, there were a few things really that struck me, and I don't want to ruin how people might hear the episode, but they both talked about preparing to go home. We prepare a lot for going to work, prepare a lot for a professional career, prepare a lot for the things we're going to face during the day, but how important it is to actually do that same preparation to go home for the people you care about, for the people caring for you. And that really struck with me. I probably have not done that well or well enough over the years, and that was pretty important to me. What did you hear?
Yeah, I would add to that of to be present when you get home and not leave the pieces for home. to be whole when you get home again. I think that was really important. The other thing that I would add is I think it's becoming more and more clear that there's not one path to leadership.
Yeah.
That everyone has a different path, a different story, a journey. Some have similarities or commonalities, but there's not one clear path. And I love that. I think that comes out loud and clear here in the conversation.
Different
today.
paths, but the same passion for people and students and learning and community building. So I agree. I heard that too. And I loved that they talked about their families. So the blending of career is, work and life together. And I loved how they did that in this episode too.
Well, we hope you enjoy this episode as much as we enjoyed doing it live at NASPA 2023. Here's the episode of Campus Confidential. So, welcome, a small but mighty group of people. This is our first live recording of Campus Confidential, The Secrets to Higher Ed Leadership. We started this podcast really thinking about working in higher ed is hard, and we wanted to create a place that would create community and connection even when you're not at a conference. So maybe you're driving home after a long day and you're like, I just need to feel a certain way. We hope you can tune in and it lifts your spirits. We also really think the rhetoric around higher education has been so negative for so long that we're hoping this is a positive light in the conversation of higher education and the work we're all doing in that space. We've seen this also be an interesting place for the people, our guests, to create a little bit of legacy, to really tell their story, talk about their journeys, the impact that they've had. And so I think that's been an unintended outcome that I just absolutely love and makes it all worthwhile. So I'm Kelsey Harmon Finn. I'm one of the co-hosts of Campus Confidential. I work for Compass Group. So let's get started officially. So again, I'm Kelsey Harmon Finn. I spent 20 years in higher education working on college campuses. I was always a part of student affairs, that's so weird, auxiliary services. So the money side of all the pieces, Illinois State, UNLV, UC Berkeley, and then for 6 years I was the CEO of NACIS, which is the National Association of College Auxiliary Services. So excited to be here with you all. And Loren, how about you introduce everyone else?
Good morning. Really, really happy to see you here this morning. As Kelsey said, this is the first time we've done this live. We've now have 5 episodes that have dropped, the latest being just yesterday. So we hope that you get a chance to listen to it. My name is Loren Rullman. I serve as the Director of Higher Education for Workshop Architects, which is a planning, strategy, and design firm specializing in student life. But I'm not an architect. I spent 32 years in higher education, all student affairs. Almost half of my career at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and then wrapped up about a little over a year ago as Chief Student Affairs Officer. And so I come to this work, I tell you this because I come to this work, like Kelsey, with a deep and abiding appreciation for who you are, for what you do, for the demands on your time, the impact that you make, the way you care for students in the community. And we come to this podcast and we come to this conference with a real desire, as Kelsey was getting at, to lift up the stories and the people and the impacts that you are making and the people in higher education are making around the country, really around the globe. So it's our hope that this podcast is not only a way to highlight those stories, those people, but also create a bit of a community. I think I might have been the one who's supposed to bring the coffee for the coffee talk today. I'm sorry. But we hope that there's a community like a coffee shop where you'll find inspiration, colleagues, humor, insight, advice, and just friends and colleagues in higher education. So we hope you'll tune in because that's really what we're striving for. The cards that Kelsey mentioned, we would also like to know what you'd like to hear and maybe even people that you'd like to hear from on this podcast as we go forward. But I'm delighted that we have these two individuals with us today. I want to introduce them, and I'm not going to say very much because I want the stories to be what's part of the podcast rather than me trying to provide all the bio and the story and the history of each of them. But the first here, right immediately on my left, is Dr. Bernard Little, who is the Vice President for Student Affairs, at Prairie State College in Chicago since, I think, just January. Is that right?
January. Since
January, so new to that role, not new to the profession. Previously had been at Waubonsie Community College, DePaul University, both in Chicago, University of Illinois, Chicago, University of Chicago, and Miami University and University of Richmond. Right. Is that right?
That's right.
So we're really, really pleased to have Bernard with us today. And sitting next to Bernard is Dr. Jim Hoppe, who's the Vice President and Dean of Campus Life at Emerson College right here in Boston. I've been there since 2016 at Emerson. Previously, Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota, the University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, St. Louis University in St. Louis, and Northwestern University in Chicago. So between these two really superb colleagues and insightful friends, they have almost 50 years of experience, and that's across 12, I think I counted right, 12 institutions. So really, really pleased that you're both with us today. So thank you. Really
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
50 years of experience.
Yeah.
How does that drop that mic? Two comments. One, I'm impressed Loren has these cards and the writing on them seems really small. And I mean, I can't see that.
It's 14 fonts.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
good. The other thing is, Loren, were you and Jim roommates? Is that right? How do you know?
No, we were in the same cohort at Indiana University in the higher ed program.
Way back.
But 12, how many, let's see, 2015. And then he went right to Emerson.
Okay, so we might need some cohort stories.
Yeah.
Well, let's start with, why don't you, Jim, start and tell us, how do you describe your job to a rideshare driver?
So I tell them that I have a responsibility to support these different offices as we work with students to make sense of what happens in the classroom and out of the classroom. And then they look at me like, huh? And then I try to fill in with stories about, here's some examples, when students live in residence halls or they participate in activities, all the way to thinking about what they want to do with their life and helping them thread all their experiences together into their own story.
Love it. How about you, Bernard?
I lie.
Ooh.
Never tell Uber drivers what I do for a living. I always say I'm a consultant from California. That always gets you.
Is that really what you say?
Always. They're dropping me off at my house. That's creepy. But no. What I really say, Prairie State College is a community college, and I always say we strive to be the community's college, the source of knowledge and education. And really, if there's something that you're interested in, you're passionate about, we want to help you see that through. And so I help students, and students being students of all ages, at any point in their career, educational journey, discover what their passions are. I get to do that for a living.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Adulting, helping people adult.
That's right.
That was a conversation I had this morning. Like, we're just helping people adult.
Mhm.
I was like, that's great. My favorite rideshare driver, once he was studying to be a WWE wrestler. And we learned that there's actually a school that you go to become.
Can you imagine being dean of students at that school?
That's right.
At the wrestling school?
You help
The
people
wrestling school.
pick costumes. They market themselves. They create a name.
Oh, gosh.
And then they learn all the moves.
The conflict resolution job there would be an interesting job.
Yeah.
You get to put on a cape and show up in the ring with someone. That would be amazing.
Well, some days I think what we do is pretty similar.
Pretty
Yeah, that's probably true,
We're
yeah.
there and we just don't know it. So,
Well,
That's a student organization.
Yeah.
create your character name, if you will. So let's back up. How did you get into the field? Like, what started? Bernard, let's start with you. What?
Sure. Yeah. I was a freshman at Bowling Green State University in Ohio, and got introduced to student affairs. My vice president at the time, Ed Whipple, a very, very exciting and passionate man for student affairs. And he said, I want to send you to this thing called leadership. And I said, what is leadership? And he said, just go. attended Leadership, and it was just an incredible experience. 6-day institute. Had a really remarkable experience of learning who I was and really searching for who my why, my passion. And that led me to interact with a lot of college professionals at Leadership. And I said, y'all do this for a living? And they said, we do this for a living. And so after that, I said, I'm interested. I'd always been interested in education, but Leadership was sort of my foundation. And from there, I had some great access to mentors by way of our vice president and others, and decided that student affairs was what I wanted to do. And so it was actually freshman year of college. I knew that I was going into student affairs, and I've been here ever since.
Made it easy in your career counselors. You knew right away.
I knew right away. Yeah, that's right.
I don't think I knew people worked at the university I attended until
right before graduation.
maybe my senior year.
Right.
Just say, how about you, Jim? Tell us your story.
I got in trouble a lot. I went to the University of New Mexico, and I had a lot of fun, and I thought I was the world's best practical joker. And finally had to go meet with the dean because I was in danger of being not able to be a student anymore. And what I really appreciated was she treated me as somebody who needed to figure things out, not as a problem. And we had this long conversation, and I ended up, before I left the office, applying to be an orientation leader. And that got me into this, whole path. And I became an OL, and I was in student government, and I was an RA, and I was in a fraternity, and all these student organizations. And I just never quit interacting with the staff in the dean's office. And phenomenal role models. So Karen Glazer was the vice president at the time, and Randy Boglin and Debbie Morris. And I just had such incredible relationships. But kind of like you said, I didn't really even kind of pay attention to it until senior year. Karen took me to lunch, and she's like, so what are you going to do with your life? And I was like, I'm kind of talking through things. And she said, have you ever considered going into student affairs? And I was kind of struck because I was so embarrassed that I hadn't picked up on the fact that these people were doing this for a reason. I just thought I was lucky to go to a college with a lot of cool people that worked at it. And so we started talking about the process. I ended up going to Indiana University, which was her alma mater, and was the same cohort with Loren. And but yeah, it started by getting in trouble and learning how to make better choices as a result.
What kind of trouble? Do you have a story you want to share? I feel like we need one.
Come on, FERPA.
Okay, well, but he discloses. He self-disclosure.
There's a non-disclosure. Yeah. So the names will be changed to protect the innocent. Yeah.
How, Jim, you just mentioned that she treated you not like a problem. Say it again. You said she treated you
not like a problem, but just somebody who needed some help figuring things out.
Mm-hmm.
It's clearly stuck with you. How has that influenced how you've approached your work?
It sticks with me all the time. To this day, I meet with anyone who's in danger of leaving the college, and we just have this conversation about what do you want to do, right? It's never too late to think about making another choice. And even if it's a case where somebody has to leave because they've done something that's so egregious, it's like, use this as an opportunity to think about putting things back together, right? And so, but the importance of that relationship and the importance of seeing someone as a person, even when they've done some stuff you wish they hadn't, is always stuck with me.
Have you ever found an occasion where you've shared your story with a student who, as a way to humanize what they're going through, or is that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
A couple times, especially in the last couple of years, and most folks resonate with it. Some folks don't, right? But that's their choice.
Mm-hmm.
But it's helped. A couple of times we've had to tell people they can't be a student for a while.
Yeah.
And but I share that story, in terms of, we're not going to give up on you. Don't give up on yourself.
Yeah. Let me ask, what are you facing in your roles right now that you didn't expect? Maybe when the year started or when you started the role, what are you facing now that's a surprise? And where do you turn, or maybe to whom do you turn? To what do you turn to inform how to navigate through what you didn't expect and therefore maybe didn't prepare for? Does that make sense as a question? What are you facing and where do you look for some guidance?
Bernard's like, Jim, you go.
You go.
Well, what I'm trying to think of is, over the last couple of years in particular, you're just, you're going to be surprised. So sometimes it doesn't even stand out.
Mm-hmm.
Who would have thought 4 years ago that I could talk for 40 minutes about wastewater and how you,
Right.
I never thought that was going to be something I would have to learn. But I think maybe that's the difference now, is just knowing that in this role, you have to be nimble and you have to be ready to respond really quickly. And then that it helps having good colleagues and people you can turn to. So
you turn to the folks around you at work primarily to help you with everything from wastewater to wayward decisions. And
yeah, so I'm really lucky at Emerson. I have a phenomenal team. Peggy Barr, when I worked at Northwestern, told me, you're how'd she put it? You always need to hire people smarter than you to do jobs. And I remember looking at her going, uh-oh. Hopefully you don't think I'm smarter than you. But that's another lesson that's always stuck with me. And so I have people I trust that I can go to, and people both on the team and then other colleagues on the President's Council that, I'm a big believer in picking up the phone and just kind of talking through things and getting people.
How about you, Bernard?
I think what we're facing, and similar to Jim, it's the unexpected, right? We just don't know what is coming at us. But I would say transitions have been a big piece of the job, and whether it's executive level transitions, losing colleagues who, I started and folks are already transitioning off. And so how do I build these relationships with new colleagues, run searches? And then the other piece I would say is I work with a lot of course, in student affairs, a lot of support staff, and the challenges that they are experiencing with work-life balance and their roles and new job descriptions, and just the mindfulness that they're bringing to the table has been really eye-opening. When I was a new professional, even mid-level professional, it was, we had this sort of motto, right? You work, work, work. And you don't ask any questions. And maybe that was problematic. Well, no, it was problematic. But, and they're telling us, right, that is problematic, and we need to do better at understanding their needs and compensation and time and all those things. And so having to learn and relearn sort of those expectations has been really eye-opening. And doing that, recognizing, right, that people aren't leaving. They're staying at institutions. And so we're going to have to invest in their development, and we're going to have to invest in getting them the things that they need in order to thrive, but also setting out some pretty clear expectations and not being liked always. And that's been tough. It's been because
it's hard.
People like me.
Yeah.
At least I thought they did. And that's been, but the reality is, and I always say, I have good friends who always say, it's not about being liked, it's about being respected, right? If you can, your decision can be respected, right? You were fair and consistent, that made a difference. And so I'm learning to lean in more to that.
Jim, looked like you had a comment there.
Right. One of the things I always tell folks is I can promise you that I have never once in my life woke up in the morning intending to piss you off. But right. I can guarantee I will.
Yep.
Right. And it's about that sense of respect. And, again, the same, I guess, maxim that goes with working with students is true for staff. They're people, right? Yep. And so people can have disagreements. I vent about people all the time, right? And I still respect them. So it's just about trying to keep that core focus, stay connected.
Bernard, can you say more about the development of staff, right? I think your point around, we used to just work, right? You're going to work until the job gets done. I worked to the point where I was on the bathroom floor where my legs weren't moving because my back was so hurt because of work. It's like, okay, well, this can't be what the future holds.
Right.
So I think you're onto something about how are we moving forward in the future. So how are you finding in your role resources? What things are you bringing to the table to help develop yourself and others?
Well, I think the first thing I recognized in this new role is nobody's coming to save you, and you are the they that you're waiting on as a vice president. You're the they. You are the doer, right? And so it's like I remember saying to some staff members, "Well, we just need to work out a development plan." And my dean, she said, "Oh, who's the we?
The royal we.
And I said,
You let me know when you get that done.
right, right. And I realized that, it's me, right? And I need to be thinking about this and investing. There's always this thing I see on LinkedIn, usually once a year, and it says, somebody asks the question, right? Well, what if we invest in them and they leave? and then the response is, what if we don't and they stay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the reality is, right, we have had that mentality for some time. It's like we don't want to put our resources into that, but we need to, right? They need it, they're yearning for it. But more importantly, beyond what they're desiring, staff, they deserve it. We committed to them, right? We need staff members to run our enterprise. And so I'm recognizing that that development has to come from within. And so I'm going back to the basics and developing frameworks around how we do our work, how we approach our work, why that matters, and what that means, right? Having a shared understanding. And a lot of it is starting with talking and having, so I've had a lot of intro meetings where I say, I'm not talking about personnel. I'm not interested in personnel matters. I'm really interested in you as people and how we can help you be successful. And from there, we're starting to write some plans and these things like, committees to focus on everything from the skills that we need, right? Technology is always a big piece. We have a lot of staff who struggle with that. And it's not as easy as just sending them to an Excel class, right? We have to be able to incorporate that. And so we have a technology committee that we're incorporating in our work and really helping us because we have some workers who've been in the field for some time and they don't want to present. They don't want to do things with technology because it is an embarrassment. When they can't do what might seem as simple and normal. And so it's just recognizing that and being able to do that. So I was in a session yesterday and we talked about, when you're a vice president, you want to be strategic, but oftentimes you find yourself in the weeds. And in student affairs, we're in the weeds quite often because we are usually the people who are helping to solve the crises in the weeds so everything else can look good. And you have to find a way to get out of the weeds so you can be strategic. And so I'm getting up earlier and I'm going to bed later and I'm thinking a lot in the shower. And I'm sending a lot of text messages to friends who are in like positions to really help me to sort of see this through and talk this through. And it's been really helpful and beneficial. But yeah, that development it's my responsibility. And I have to do that. And whether that is the financial, right? Every, conferences and virtual webinars, all of those things. But other things is, talking and treating people, like humans. Mm-hmm. And I think we think sometimes that it's this high level, right? That it has to be well thought out plans and stuff like that. Sometimes it's like, Jim, how are you doing? And what does that actually mean? Mm-hmm. And being ready for that response.
Yeah. Jim, you have anything to add before we?
No, I think Bernard hit it right on the head. It's, but I do think though we're at a crossroads in student affairs. We recognize that staff can't work as much as we did 20 years ago, and that we need to think differently about what it means to come to work every day. And we're in a time when students are even more than ever seemingly needing and wanting these relationships and connections and. They want to be able to go to an office and find a person, and they want to go and find you because they talked to you yesterday and they connect with you. And I'm not sure how we figure that out, but I know we have to. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah. I think it's an interesting time when we think about it. I was actually in conversation with someone the other day about AI and chat and can AI take over jobs in higher ed? And I think about it from a perspective of maybe they can, so that the humans can do the human work and the transactional work can be done by technology and computers. And so how do we think about it in a way that it helps us become more humans connecting so that there's that time and space and there's not someone in a corner reading 1,000 applications
right
all of the time, right? They're the person that's sitting down saying, hey, why do you want to be here? What is that connection point? So I think there's an interesting shift that's possible. It's just, are we willing to do it?
And we have to create the time for staff to be able to do those things. That's right. And if you're like me, and I'm not as mature as Jim, I should say. But if you're like me, when you get one of those AI things, you're immediately like representative, right?
Yeah.
Like I want to talk to somebody, even in the transactional moments,
so
right?
And
Get so angry, just scream. I don't know why you have to scream it so loud, because it's like
You definitely
they heard
have to
you.
scream it.
Yeah, you
And
do.
then you're like punching a number.
Zero.
Zero
Right.
has to get to a human, right?
That's right.
So let's shift a little and talk about your purpose right now. I feel like, right, when you get to this level, there has to be some sort of grounding in what you're doing. So what's your purpose right now, and how does that show up in your work?
So I'm not ready to retire, but I can see it from here. And so I've been thinking a lot about when I look back, what do I want to say I've done? Right? You know, there was what kind of environment do I want to create? And I feel good about the relationships I've had, and you know, the students and staff from other institutions that I've kept in touch with and become great friends. And so there's that personal aspect of it, but at the same time, kind of thinking back to what we just talked about, I believe in this field, right? And even as frustrated as I've been at times over the last couple of years, I know how important the work is, and being at NASPA just reinforces that, right? You see all these success stories and all these people who are working hard and just care so much. And I feel this responsibility to, not for my legacy, but to help make sure that student affairs continues in whatever form is going to be beneficial into the future, because it is. I mean, students don't come to college for student affairs, but they stay and they have a better experience because of the work we do. And so, yeah, that's what I think about a lot now. How do we set ourselves up for success and set the staff we're working with now up for success, so that in 20 more years, somebody can be at this microphone and talk about what challenges lie ahead.
Yeah. Are you doing anything different in your day-to-day to kind of meet that objective? Is there something that you've shifted in your time, or?
That's a good question. I think I try. You know, we have those days where you start off. I hate the mornings when you get up and like, oh, I got 3 free hours, because it's guaranteed. You know, that stuff is
Something's
coming.
coming.
Always.
But trying to, you know, I've got a little notebook I keep at the side of my desk that is, you know, when there's a free moment, remind myself that, oh yeah, I got to work on this. And but I guess the overarching theme is just the connections, right? You know, trying to make sure that everything we're doing in the division makes sense in relation to everything else that's happening in the division and the college.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I turned 38 on January 1st. And
I kind of remember.
you remember 38? Yeah.
What were you doing at 38?
Oh my God.
And it's used to be something, especially in spaces like NASPA, where you're the young one, and it's like you don't really want to talk about that. I'm not afraid to talk about that anymore, right? I've achieved a lot of good things, and it's because of people pouring into me. It's because I've really hustled hard, and so now that I'm here in this moment, I want to really stay in this moment, and I want to stay in this space. And you can get caught up a lot on ego, right? And climbing and all those things. And those things aren't purposeful and meaningful. What grounds me is a few things. One, so my family is critically important to me. I have 2 daughters who are 10 and 12, and they really don't care about the crises that are happening on campus. They care if I'm there, if I'm present, and if I'm making a difference in their lives. They want to go on vacations, and they want to see the new John Wick movie, even though, no, we're not seeing it. But they want to do those things with their dad. That's important for me because I didn't have a father growing up. So my father wasn't present in my life. And so being present for my daughters is something that's just really meaningful to me. And it grounds me. My partner is also really meaningful to me and how I support her work. She is a finance executive at the Federal Reserve, and she reminds me all the time that she's not a traveling spouse. So we're going to have to figure this out, and we're going to have to do that together. And so that's important for me. But the people, right? So I have the position, right? I have the PhD, I have those things, and the people is really what grounds me. And I think our field, we need folks who care about the people. And what I mean by that is we need folks who are going to make outreach and who are going to listen and who are going to return phone calls and emails and be present for folks. Not walk around at NASPA looking at name tags, but looking in their eyes and saying, how are you? And how can I help? And how can I support? All of those things are really critical and important. And how can I do that? And I have some years to do that, right? I don't plan to retire anytime soon. And I have some time. I've had these experiences. And so how can I now give back? And that's why I entered the field. I entered the field because it was this vice president and then a dean of students who made a anonymous donation into my financial aid account that allowed my balance to go from negative to positive, so that I can make it to the next year and not have to ask in an embarrassing way, because I didn't know how I was going to get the money. And so how can I give back and how can I be purposeful? And so I'm figuring that out. And it's not the position, it's not the degree or anything like that. It really is just pouring into people and figuring out what that means.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, Bernie, you talk about your kids. I remember one time when one of my sons was very little, and he wanted to make sure that I took him to the amusement park at Mall of America, like I'd promised, and he buried the pager in the backyard. So he had picked
pager?
Up, yeah,
that's
I know,
just
right?
okay.
That's
Well,
all
right,
there.
yeah.
Jim is more mature.
I tilt that 50-year experience. But then as they got older, one of my kids came up one night and goes, let's come up with a code word. When you've had a really tough day at work, and then you come home and we're all over you about whatever, what's the word so that at least we know, right? That you've had some other stuff going on. And I thought, it's how insightful that was. But, but it also then, each one of those reminders was like, okay, yeah, that's a good reminder to me to remember what's important, right? That this job is great, but my family is forever. And, so it was helpful to get those reminders from time to time.
It's good to have people that are love you and are less impressed with your title and responsibilities and just tell you where I need you here. Yeah, that's great. You've talked so much about people and people that have been influential in your lives and careers. I wonder, and I don't know if you use the word mentor, but what the image in my head was, these are people that have mentored you. And I wonder if you have advice for people that find themselves in a mentoring role. I'm going to submit that there's probably as much bad mentoring as there is good mentoring. And so therefore, do you have, given your experiences or the mentoring you do or have received, do you have advice for people to find themselves in mentoring roles, in a position to really profoundly influence others in higher education or anywhere?
Listen more than you talk.
That's right.
It's not about us. It's about the person's experience that you're interacting with. And I think back to the mentors have been the most impactful for me. And they, it's not that they didn't share their experiences, but they fully understood what I was going through before they just whipped out, here's what I want to tell you, or here's what you should do.
Yeah, I agree with that. Listening, certainly much more, and not being full of yourself, right? There's this verse that says, those who are exalted will be humbled, and those who are humble will be exalted. And what that reminds me of is, don't call yourself a mentor. Right. Just do it. Yeah. Right. Don't be so caught up on that and how many you have, because we all are busy and we all have folks who are looking to us and who need us. And so just being there and being present, but also just being who you needed when you were in those situations. There was many times, and even now today, right? Like you're in a new job, I'm in this new job, and there's a lot of, I don't know how to even ask that question. But I'm also embarrassed sometimes to even call colleagues to ask that question, because it's like this implied thing, like, you should know that. Why don't you know that? And why are you in that position if you don't know that right yet? And the reality is, none of us know. We don't know, right? This stuff, we make this up as we go. We get more experience, but every year and every situation is different than the last one. And so you gain more insight and sort of more maturity. But just that mentorship piece is doing, being, writing back, responding, giving your time, because folks are really looking at you, and also protecting your time. I would say, right, don't take on those responsibilities if you don't have the time to do those things. And I'll say this about, you brought up a great point, Jim, about family and, the code word and things like that. When I think about what we do to get ready in the morning, right, to prepare ourselves mentally, physically, and emotionally to go into work and to do the things for the people. I was at a conference once and they said, you rarely do that to go home to your family. You don't get ready.
Oh, wow. That's that's really
to go home. You come home pretty exhausted. And then they just get what's left of you. And it's like, how are you preparing to go and face your family and to give them what they deserve? And sometimes it's that family is a dog, right? Like, how many times do we skip out on those walks because we're exhausted? Sometimes it's a partner. Sometimes it's, external family, whatever the case might be. But how are we preparing mentally? And I think that ties into mentorship, right? This idea of, right, if you don't have to give, then certainly don't take it on. But if you've committed to that, making sure that you're all in.
Yeah.
Well, the most important ones evolve into relationships.
They do.
Right?
They do.
And it's here at this conference, I have my core group of people that I can be really vulnerable with.
Yeah.
Right? That I might worry about what they're going to think of me, but I don't care.
Yeah.
And I know they're going to tell me
Yep.
directly what's important.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also think when we talk a lot about, we use the word mentor, and one thing I believe is really important right now, would love you all to check me on this, is thinking about mentor, sponsor, coach, being somewhat super intentional. I think, Bernard, you're the one that said this. It's like, we don't need to collect mentors or mentees, right? We're not collecting people. And sometimes I think people will do that. Like,
That's
I
right.
have 10 mentors. Do you? Or
Right.
what is that?
Right.
So I think there's mentors. I think there's sponsors, right? This idea that when I'm not in the room, someone is speaking on my behalf and elevating me, or I'm doing that for other people. And then coach, right? We're in it. This is the team kind
That's
of
right.
thing. So I don't
That's
know. I hear a little amen here, so I feel validated. Thank you.
that's good actually. Jim and I had lunch earlier. This just by happen chance, we saw each other downtown, and he's coming from a work event, and he said to me, "Oh, there's this position that's open at this institution," and I said, "Yeah, I'm going to try and get. We have a mutual acquaintance. I'm going to try and get him to apply." And he's like, "Oh." Well, I recommended him, and it was like, yeah, and I'm going to serve as his reference, right? And that person, right? So the position reports to a vice president that's here, but the person that's applying for that role or will eventually apply for that role is not here. And so we were sponsoring even without intentionally doing that. And I have pulled that vice president aside multiple times and said, this person is a good person, and I think you should consider putting it top of your mind. And that's something that I did that was very intentional. Why? Because it was done for me, right? Because it matters. And sometimes, right, when you hear from good people and you want to help elevate and support them because they are good and others need that. But we also rely on that, right? Like, we have HR processes and we follow those to a T, and compliance is certainly important. But sometimes you just don't know what you're getting, and so it helps, right? That sponsorship to know, because I trust what Jim is saying, right? I've known Jim for some time. I trust that he can be good, and this vice president that we're talking about, he trusts me, and so I can sponsor in that way. I think a coach, right? In coaching, I do a lot of this, but I also have a lot of peer coaches, very similar to what Jim was saying. This group of people who are going to be like, no, Bernard, you were wrong. That was stupid. You shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have responded like that. And it's like, okay, I'll help you get out of this, but I just want to call you out and say, no, that's not what you should have done. And I think you certainly need those people. But then the mentorship, right? And they're all important. And sometimes they can be all one person, but they have separate responsibilities. I think the mentorship is also important too, because it's just someone who's solid, who you can trust, who you can go to when you need it. I lost my brother last year, and it was a really, really tough time. And I saw how losing him, that was impacting me in my work. And I am the oldest male and the second oldest child in my family of 7. And so I had to be strong for them. And it was like I looked to a certain group of folks who I could be vulnerable with and not be responsible and take, my hair down and really just be real. And that matters the most. And so you just never know what you're doing for someone, but you should be doing it intentionally.
And I think sharing your story, right? Appreciate hearing you share that about your brother and your father and earlier. And I think a lot of times when you get to a role of vice president, you become these people that are not human.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think bringing your human self to the table in those conversations is key. So we do have, Loren, did you have a follow-up question before I move on to audience? So the first one's very important, Jim. It's for you.
No.
So what's the code word?
My code word is banana peel. And my husband's code word was Snickers.
Oh, banana peel and Snickers.
Mm-hmm.
So even to this day, like if we accidentally say one of those words, the kids will look up,
Whoa. That's amazing. Those are great words. And then
I hope your staff are listening. So when they say those words, it's like,
if you're running around the office going, banana peel, banana peel, banana peel.
They're used to it. Yeah.
Now the code word's gonna have to get changed.
Right.
Yeah, I was also thinking about you talking about the transition to home life. Now, I work from home when I'm not traveling, and that there's not that car time or that downtime. So as you're telling, like, what's your transition? I was sitting here thinking, so like wandering around spastically in your house,
right.
like, not sure if you're done with work or if you should start cooking dinner or go for a walk. Is that a healthy transition?
Listen, whatever you need to do, go get the mail and then you come back.
No, that's real. The walk is real. Walk is real.
Yeah.
Did you have another?
There is, but we're going to do that with the wrap-up question.
Okay.
So,
all right. So we've just got a few more minutes. I was wondering in our remaining minutes if you have a couple of thoughts about what are the things that you think leaders should know, but people are afraid to tell them.
Go.
Whenever you get that, you have that instinct like you're going to get somebody and you kind of go, oh, gotcha. If you get that feeling, don't do it. That should be your cue to sit back and think again.
check yourself.
Yeah. Bernard, thoughts about what leaders should know and people are afraid to say, tell them?
That's a good question. And Jim, you had a good response. I think how I would respond is, no matter how much you can't stand that colleague or that person, they matter. So you're going to have to suck it up. And more importantly, it's really not about you. Right. It's not about you. When you're in your role, no matter how mad they've made you, no matter how, manipulative they've been, you have to find the resistance and shake it off, because it's really not about you. Your broken relationship with that person or that division could really hurt things for students.
Yeah, that's right.
And you need to own them.
The other thing I think I would say is always value the people who take the time to give you critical feedback directly. And it's so easy just to, can you believe what he did, right? Or talk about it around the corners and never deal with it directly. And it's never fun to have somebody sit down and tell you that, they don't like something you're doing, but that takes a lot. And so I think you have to value that. And
it takes a lot of courage to do that. Exactly. People are afraid to do that. And I found I need to invite it. And then stop that little urge when I hear it, like you're talking about. Oh, that's
you just have to accept it. Thank you. You just say thank you.
Right.
Yeah, I had Jonathan Poulard. I don't know, some of you might know him. He was in student affairs, and I had the pleasure of working with him for a few years. And one thing he said to me, and boy, did I hate every second of it. He's like, when someone is frustrating you or something's bothering you, it's a mirror of something inside of you.
Yeah.
And so how do you look into yourself of why that's bothering you so much and how can you move differently from that space. So boy, this sticks with me today. And those mirrors, they're really tough. Super tough. So last question for our time together. And from the audience, right, what are the top 3 challenges or challenges you see happening in the next couple of years? So I'm going to mix challenges with hope for the future because I feel like the challenges bring us hope. So what would you all see as that challenge, hope for our future? Bernard, you're going to go first.
I'm going to go first.
Yeah.
I hope that we can get back to the place where collaboration and connection was the foundation of everything that we do, because we need to work together more and better. We need to do those things. I hope and know that this will be true is that we stop looking at our situations as doom and gloom, but yet as opportunities to do things differently. Because life has shown us, at least over the last 3 years, that we can do different and we can pivot. And then I really do hope that we curtail this idea that there is no value in higher education, and there is no value in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I really do. We've stood the test of time with a number of these issues before, and I believe that we can do those again. And we have to be willing to lean into that and to challenge that, because if there were no value in those things, I wouldn't be able to sit here. Someone who looks like me, who didn't have the experiences that others have had, I wouldn't be able to sit here. And so I hope that we can continue to fight and push those things.
Yeah.
I hope we find a way to continue to keep students at the center of what we do. And I think it's easy sometimes when I say that, I think sometimes staff in particular here will put their needs above mine. And that's not what I mean. It's more about understanding what the impact of a decision is going to be on the life of students, right? And then making your decisions around that. And sometimes it's, you're going to have to decide to do something differently, or if you know it's going to have a negative impact on students, well, then then you have to think about what do we do to alleviate that in other ways. So it's not about diminishing your values or your time, but it's just keeping that at the center. I think that helps make decisions. The second is kind of related to what you said, Bernard, about DEI work and the importance. And I can't imagine that not being a central focus of the field. But with these challenges, I think we've got to step up and find a way to continue to have this conversation and advance and challenge and support our colleagues who are in places where they're at risk if they try to do this work. I'm really fortunate to be in Massachusetts and have a supportive campus. But I hope we can find a way as a field to continue to have this be at the forefront and not give up on this conversation.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And we are at time. We've heard such good things today, everything from be who you needed in your career to see challenges and people not as problems, but as opportunities for caring and teaching, to prepare to be as present for your family as you are for your colleagues in campus, and if all else fails, bury the pager, I suppose. That's the other good piece of advice. You have some very lucky students at Emerson and Prairie State with your leadership. We're so grateful for your generosity of time and spirit here today. Would you help me thank both Bernard and Jim, and then we'll call it a session.
Campus Confidential is presented by Compass Group, produced by Corey Inscoe and Jen Fisher, with your hosts, Kelsey Harmon Finn and Loren Rullman.